You saw all the episodes.
Yes.
Okay, you went through everything.
All the way to the end.
You saw my barely, legible and understandable critique.
But your accents were good.
Okay, good. I tried. I really did.
You did.
I really did.
I think you played an absolutely excellent 19, 20-year-old girl.
Awesome. Okay, so I went through the book. By the way, a couple of people who had listened to me narrate it really loved the book.
Oh,
they loved the characters. They loved kind of everything.
Glad to hear that.
There was a couple critiques here and there that
were those in comments?
No.
Okay.
But I think it just echoed a lot of the stuff that I told you, right? Or kind of the stuff I commented on.
Sure.
Really nothing that you don't know already that we haven't discussed. However, I want to talk about kind of everything that we went through and you went through in the whole process of creating the book and the characters and everything. So this is going to be very
torturous.
Not really. I would say it's more just, banter and understanding and, as an author and a writer and developing those characters, kind of who you are as a person, where they came from, and how the developmental cycle of Thassodar came up.
Next time, I'm going to bring some tea.
I mean, I feel like we should have
sipping
some. I think I have soda.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, that's all I have right now.
It's okay. I brought water. It's fine.
Okay, good. So we're just gonna jump into it with a couple questions and kind of, not necessarily workshop it, but just kind of understand the book, the characters, the development, and where Thassodar came from, right? The deep down, lost child that is stuck inside of you. Yeah,
one might hope.
Well, it's one of those things, right? Like you want to understand where the characters and the author is coming from, right? So when we talk about, your book in length, right? Thassodar specifically has this weird kind of, not necessarily James Bond-esque, but kind of this undercover kind of ideology of who he is. He's an alien. How, in the context of him specifically, how did you develop his personality, his specific traits, that dualness of his identity, kind of, and then plugging him into human life? How did that all culminate?
Well, first, this story has been in development on and off for at least, I think, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So trying to think back and remember exactly where everything came from can be tough. I remember when I first moved to Texas, seeing the highway interchanges, the cloverleafs, and where I came from back east, we didn't have those, and so it was kind of new to me. And I remember driving, at sunset, at twilight, home from work or off to work or whatever, and just thinking about how interesting it was that the roads just kind of rose up out of the ground into the air. And it had kind of an otherworldly feel to it. And so I got captivated by the idea of seeing the earth and humanity through a non-native's eyes, so to speak. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to do with Thassodar, was to see us through a different lens. And then I like the idea of essentially a park ranger, because when you've got a park ranger, they've got a territory that they're responsible for, and they're responsible for watching over it, but letting it develop on its own naturally, and managing the tourism, but keeping everything safe as well. And so that's kind of Thassodar's job on Earth. He is a galactic park ranger,
Yeah.
And so those are the elements that I think were the foundation of Thassodar's character.
Okay. That's awesome. So, I mean, you have this character, you have this kind of this not necessarily, singular alien race. You have this huge, rich galactic bureaucracy that you've developed, all these species, kind of all these, and not only, species, we have timelines, you have intricate parts of civilization growth. How did you, I mean, what was the idea? What was the, how did you construct and, idealize, like put it all into written all these different civilizations and put them together and kind of
The galactic world building, so
yeah,
to speak.
yeah, it's but like these specific ones, right? I mean, you can always say, oh, there's a million species. We can talk about Star Wars, the
Sure.
Galactic Alliance, all this stuff, and
Yeah.
you have hundreds of different species and different aliens, but you don't talk about them. But why these specifically?
Um, what do you mean? Do you mean Thassodar's
No, I
species,
mean
or
all of the species that we talk about in the book. I mean,
okay,
you
just
have
across the total
yeah,
book?
yeah. I think we saw or we read at least 7 different species,
Well, let's say we have Thassodar species,
right?
and we have each of the 4 henchmen are
Correct,
different species.
right?
Lomax himself is a different species,
Okay,
so
there's
there's
6.
6 right
Yeah.
there. Thassodar's captain, Biormi, is a
Okay.
different species,
Okay.
and then we occasionally get glimpses of, like, we have a few guards that come in at the end with Biormi and so forth.
Right. So let's
So,
let's say 10 different species that you
right.
discuss, right? Because I mean, you also have the council, and then you
Yeah.
have the brief conversations we hear with other,
True.
we don't know what species they are, but just as brief
Yeah.
conversations we have. So I mean, why focus on those character traits and those species? I mean, obviously there was a process creating them.
Well, yes. Um, Part of it was, okay, I feel like any given character is a product of a multitude of things. And part of that, especially when you talk about aliens, is where they come from. And so their history and their culture play a huge role into who that character is, in my opinion. And so I felt like when I initially wrote it, I was like, all right, I'm gonna have this 4-armed guy, and I'll have, a Greek god will throw in there, and then this short little tiny psychopath, and I just kind of went for it. What would be fun? What would be cool to have? But then I felt like, as I developed those, that each of them needed a full species they come from,
Mhm.
and so you don't get their full story in the text at the moment. But like the octopus alien,
Mhm.
whose name escapes me at the moment, Jakar
Mhm.
Dorsch. Um, he was born in an illegal zoo,
Mm.
and when he grew up, they said, "We've got too many exhibits in this exhibit," and so they threw him out.
Mhm. Now, is
Which,
this the same zoo that he's working at?
no, when he gets captured,
Yeah.
it's not the same. It's not the same people.
Right.
What he does is he falls in with the only people he encounters when he gets thrown out of the zoo
Right.
is smugglers. People who are capturing species and bringing them and selling them to the zoo.
Mhm.
That's who he ends up falling in with.
Mm.
And so, but he ends up being a very talented and brilliant engineer. And so they take him on as ship's engineer. But if you notice in that prologue, he's not mean. He's not, unkind. He's just doing his job,
Yeah.
and living the only life that he knows, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Grote, um, he came from a family of criminals.
Mm.
Like, his family has been on the criminal side of life as far back as he knows, and so he was raised to, find a niche that isn't necessarily within the law and make a life out of it,
Mhm.
and it's just business. That's
Yeah.
something that he was told when he was growing up. And
Yeah.
so each character I tried to go through and say, okay, this is the character I've come up with. This is how they're neat or different, or what their style is, and let me backdate that, and what would cause that? What would they come from to create that?
Okay.
And so in a way, almost all of them have a very similar background as Thassodar. Thassodar lost his family and his world. So did Jakar Dorsch, lost his family and his world. So did Hermes. His family was imprisoned, and he's the last one of them. So there's a similarity to them, but they've made different choices and had different helping hands.
Right.
Thassodar fell in with Baromi and was grew up in a military environment as an adopted kid. And then he went into the Rangers as soon as he was old enough.
Okay. That's awesome. Most people aren't going to admit to it, but I think Groot's probably one of my favorite characters.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. He just seems kind of like fed up with everybody. And I can really connect with that character. Not the evil part of it.
He enjoys dealing with imports and exports.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see that being a connection.
So, there's this kind of theme that can
oh, sorry. I just remembered we forgot about the ambassador.
Yeah.
His entire species, which is a whole separate thing.
We had kind of touched on him a little bit, but there's this theme throughout your whole book, right? It's this kind of cultural observance, anthropological curiosity that Thassodar has. You touch on it in almost every chapter. Was this for your sake? Was it a curiosity? Was it real world observations? Or is it just science fiction?
I'd say it's probably a little of all of it, honestly. One of the first scenes that I wrote was the scene where Thassodar is in a diner and he encounters a group of tourist aliens that are disguised, and they're just slugging down caffeinated soda. And he's like, yeah, most of the galaxy has banned caffeine. It's a drug, but this particular culture, it's completely illegal, and these guys are just taking advantage of Earth laws in order to just slug caffeine. And he goes in and is like, he handles it the way most bouncers would be like, all right, settle down, move on, or I'm taking you in. Yeah. But I wrote that scene, and that was one of the early ones. So it was a good 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And my wife read it and was just like, I love this. She goes, that is so true. Like that is.
Well, I mean, it's that trope of drug tourism, right?
Yeah.
You go to Amsterdam, or you go to
exactly. Yeah. But painting it as caffeine, which most people, especially 15 years ago, wouldn't have looked at caffeine and thought anything of it. The same way that people didn't think anything of smoking 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
Right. I mean, I think that we talk about caffeine. I don't think people think of it that way either. Now, now they're over caffeinating things for some reason. But no, I get it. Yeah, no, that's it's a really interesting take on kind of society as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And I think we had this discussion too. There's this commentary that you have on kind of the customs of humanity, right? We talk about that scene. We talk about the nightclubs, kind of the mating rituals, right?
Right.
And you put it in species logs, right? And we had discussed this before.
Yeah.
What message are you really trying to convey, and why use it through an alien's perspective?
I don't think it's so much a clear message. I don't think there's a statement I'm trying to make of, hey, you kids in your nightclubs need to settle down or anything like that. I think it's more just the act of questioning.
Okay.
I forget which philosopher it was that said, if you question everything, whenever you get down to the point where you no longer have any questions, then that is truth. And for this, there are so many things that you take for granted, and that's in everything and everybody. If you're a native speaker of a language, you take the way the language is formed for granted. If you work in a certain industry, you take certain things for granted. And so when you have a newcomer come in and they're like, wait, we do what? Why? And you're like, that's just how we do it. I don't even know. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that trying to approach and see Earth and see humanity through outside eyes creates the opportunity to question what we all take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And not so much in order to say this is right or this is wrong, but to question, is it right or is it wrong?
And how do you think your readers are going to respond to those kind of familiarities you're creating with the human activities, right? And developing this kind of, in a sense, almost bastardization of norms, right? I mean, we're talking about, the mating rituals, we're talking about, fast food and kind of those normalities that we see throughout our days, right?
Right.
And Thassodar is really into it in moderation, but how do you feel your readers are going to absorb that information?
I hope that first of all, they are entertained or amused.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's step one, is I want them to look at me like, oh, that's funny. I can see that. And then I hope that the next time they are sitting in a restaurant and there's this loud table that are just throwing back sodas and they're just like, wonder where Thassodar is.
Yeah.
So I think primarily I want them to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
And second to that is to open their mind to questioning things.
Mm-hmm.
To possibly look at their world with fresh eyes and things that maybe I didn't write about. That they look at a Christmas tree, stand in the middle of the room, and be like, interesting, dead tree in the middle of the room with bells on it. And just.
I mean, I think that's a better way of looking at it than actually, deep diving into the real reason behind of burning Christmas trees. But,
right.
But that's a great way of seeing it, right? So we come back to Thassodar, and there's these snippets kind of throughout the story where he's doing this self-reflection, right? Where he's talking about being the last of his kind.
Yes.
He has this kind of deep emotional burden to everything. What does this personal mission, kind of this connection with that, say about his identity, right? Like, really, what is that loss? How does that fit into the totality of the universe, or his universe?
Part of what I wanted to do with Thassodar's character was it's that idea of being alone in a crowd. Here he is on a planet with however many trillion of people that he loves and that he embraces all of, and it's like, oh, I want to explore this, I want to understand that, I want to experience this. And yet, in the middle of all of those people, he's alone. And so what Thassadar, particularly early in the novel, is searching for is a real connection. And he connects with people, both aliens with conversations, and with humans, but he keeps himself separate from the humans, kind of like a park ranger would with the animals. You don't just go hang out with them, but you observe them from afar. And so he keeps up this separation wall. And with most of the aliens, their work. Not that they're a lot of work to deal with, but they are his work. It's all business. They call and they're like, hey, I need to come visit the planet. Okay, fill out this paperwork, and so he doesn't get to make a connection with most aliens either.
Mm-hmm. Very bureaucratic in that regard.
Yeah. But because of all of that, it leaves him more alone than it at first seems. At the beginning, we are doing this after all of the other ones have been published.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't worry about spoilers too much.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, he's going to nightclubs, he's hooking up with people, but in the morning, he just leaves. He puts a tracker in him,
mm-hmm.
For work, and leaves. And so there's still not that connection. He's not developing or building relationships. He has no relationship with his home world, not even just family, but anybody on his home world, because of the laws about development and so forth. His adoptive father, Biomi, is his boss, who is not on world. So his relationships are very few and very thin.
Mm-hmm.
which leaves him very alone. And so a large part of what he's looking for is true connection. But he doesn't find that until Valentina, you know? I mean, even the one friend he thought he had,
Yeah.
you know what happened there.
Yeah.
But when Valentina kind of forces her way into his life, they build a relationship of mutual respect and of caring for each other. And he starts to understand that he's finally finding what he's been missing for so long.
Right. We talk about, his friend or his alleged friend and
Right.
Valentina, you have this dynamic between dark events, kind of this the sombering tone, and then these humorous kind of like little upbeat, tosses in there and everything. Sometimes even very, satire-esque. But how do you find the balance so you don't disrupt the flow of the story? Like where was that dividing line where you're like, this is kind of where I want to follow this line, not be too far over here and too far over here?
It's something you just got to feel, honestly, like as I'm reading it, because there were times when I was just like, okay, that joke's ridiculous and doesn't belong here. Most of the time, either I gave the joke to Jakar Dorsch because that was just part of his character.
He was total dad joke.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The walking dad joke.
But I also, like, early on when things were developing, the first third of the novel, you have the henchmen, ripping through a theater or tearing up an encampment or processing humans into energy, whatever it was that they had going on. And you had the mostly dark and psychopathic elements going on there. And then we switch to a scene, but it's a different location where it's, Thassodar and Valentina, or it's Thassodar and Lomax. And it would be a lighter break to balance off of that, and I like that because you need some grit, but I like a happy story. There's enough darkness. It's kind of cliche to say almost, but there's enough darkness in the world.
Yeah.
That a little bit of light's a nice thing. It feels good.
Don't tell Stephen King that.
Oh, not a chance. But that's okay. Stephen and I don't agree on everything. He and I disagreed disparately on adverbs.
Yeah.
But if you notice, or maybe you didn't, I don't know, did you notice all of those early scenes with Lomax? He was always checking his watch.
I did not catch that.
His intention, the whole purpose of him having lunch with Thassodar, bringing over pizza with Thassodar, playing games with Thassodar, his whole intention was to keep Thassodar busy when the action was going down with the henchmen.
Okay, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, didn't catch it. I guess I didn't.
It was one of those subtleties that obviously you threw in that I didn't catch. You don't want blatant subtleties that just kind of defeats the purpose of it, right?
Hey, Thassodar.
Yeah,
got 5 more minutes, and we can have lunch.
Yeah, pretty much, right? So we talk about the beginning of your book and having all these, and I gave you crap for it, having all these prologues, right?
True, and possibly rightly so.
And it's fine. You're building this developmental story arc, and you look at it. Are they? I know we had a discussion, but were they intently designed to build onto something bigger, or was this just a noir stylistic choice to go? This is what I want to do, right?
When I first wrote it, like when I first finished it, the first rough draft of it, the prologues were not there, and I forget now who it was, but someone who read it for me said the criminals are so interesting. I want more of them. I want to know their backstory. I want to know what happened to this. I'm like, that makes sense. And so I wrote these prologues as when the criminals get arrested and brought into, and the idea being that each of those arrests kind of brings them together in the end anyway, because they all end up at the same prison. And Grote meets with each of them, and then Lomax contacts Grote, and Grote says, "Okay, I got this guy, and I got this guy, and I got this guy. We can do this." And so then Lomax breaks them out, and then they go forward with their plan.
Yeah. Well, just like you critiqued me, why not add those into a reflective story within the story as opposed to a prologue? Because, like I said, the story, the way it's developed now, it's very film noir, right? It's very, that genre of kind of developmental story building into the particular character.
Yeah.
So,
actually, I might on the next rewrite. I might actually be pulling out the prologues completely.
Oh, okay. Are you going to pepper them in, or are they just completely coming out?
Well, some of the information will be peppered in. What I've, based on feedback, what I've kind of decided is that there's just too much. Like, there's too much POV for not too many POVs.
Okay.
And for not a huge amount of purpose.
Okay.
And so, for instance, Shuld's POV. We see him get captured at his lab. And all that does is show he's a psychopath.
I
and
like that.
That's not obvious. I mean, it's.
I know, but I think it's. I like that scene.
Well, that's part of my problem. Is I like all those scenes.
I like that scene more than the other characters.
Well, maybe I'll try to work that in.
I like that kind of like sociopathic. Like, I just killed my assistant just because I can.
Well, and I think what I want to do is I want to try and work those in more. So my plan, what I'm thinking at the moment, is to choose one of the criminals, one of the henchmen, and let them be our criminal POV. And so they will get to have conversations with Shuld and with the other criminals, where a lot of that will come out, and they will get to make observations about the others that you would otherwise have seen in those flashbacks.
Okay.
And so that's kind of my thinking. And that way, instead of, because right now each of those criminals gets 2.5 scenes of POV, where you see the world through their eyes. But you're still seeing mostly the same world. It's just a slightly different perspective. And you never really get to bond with any of them, I think. And so what I'm thinking is, if I pick one of them, then you can bond with that one as the criminal POV, and then he'll get to interact with the others because they're closely together. And then you only have 3 perspectives that you have to worry about. Thassodar's, Valentina's, and the henchmen and the criminal element.
I think Valentina's perspective, her POV, is so. I hate to say it this way, but it's so small in the context of the entire story, where I don't know if it adds value to the development of the story. There's obviously parts where she's alone and that she needs to have that POV.
Right.
But in the whole picture, I think I gave you this critique too. Like, I didn't feel any connection between her and her dad. I don't think it was necessary to have it in there. I feel like that was a throwaway story arc that never turned into anything. It was like, oh yeah, okay, well, that's what drove her to become, Space Ranger or whatever. But I mean, realistically, you could also say that Thassodar drove her to do it, right? And it would work the same way.
Right.
It's just, it was such a kind of like a throwaway statement where I'm like, there's really no. I don't see it. I don't need it. It's not for me, at least.
Yeah, her entire family actually is one of the last things that have been added to the book. We didn't see her family at all, originally.
I like the blip. I like the little blip of the family, right? It's like, okay, cool, mom, grandma, great. Like, you have this kind of like, oh, she's a real human being, right?
Right.
But then you just kind of like haphazardly throw, oh, my dad, he was a police officer. Now he's dead.
You can't be a hero without a dead parent, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, I don't know. For me, at least, right? Okay. It wasn't necessary. Now, you can argue with my mom, who actually heard this whole thing, and she's like, I think you meet the dad in the story. because it, like I said, it develops that arc between her and becoming a ranger.
Yeah.
But again, that also can develop with Thassodar along the way too. There's no linchpin, is what I'm saying. Right?
Maybe so.
I don't know.
Maybe so.
Maybe read look at it.
Yeah.
You can take my comment with a grain of salt.
I'm gonna listen to your mom.
Yeah, there you go. So tell me, Thassodar.
On the note about Valentina, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
In some versions of as the story developed, I actually got feedback that Valentina was the most liked and identified with character, and that Thassodar actually fell flat. And so I've had to develop Thassodar a lot to bring him up. And in fact, there is a sequel planned. I have a sequel that's planned. It's not written, but it is outlined. It's all Valentina.
So I'm gonna maybe half correct whatever statement was. I don't think Thassodar fell flat. I think he's just cold. Even now, the emotional response to certain interactions is just kind of non-existent, and that's fine for the character. He's an alien species. He went through all this stuff, and he doesn't want to get attached. You explained it out right, and I think a lot of people want a human element. They want that emotional element. They want to connect with the character in that sense. But as an alien species who is there for a job, I can't say, hey, go to work and I want you to connect with everybody at work, right? And have those interactions with everybody at work. And I want to feel your humanity within, it's a job.
Right.
Right. That's what you do. So I get that statement, but I think it's more, he's just emotionless in those regards. Because I didn't feel like he was
guarded.
Yeah. I don't feel like he was flat, because I think there's a lot of development, especially like you said, if you're creating a second story, that you can build that character a little bit more. And you feel it come out. And like I said, that little blip with Valentina's family, you feel it come out when he's talking to Abuela. Like, you totally feel it. It starts to kind of break down that exterior wall that he's developed. But
out of curiosity, how did you feel that scene in particular? Because that I speak un poquito Spanish.
Yes. Like
none.
Yeah.
So how did you feel that was the Spanish was the second language was handled in that scene?
So you kind of, for the general reader, I think it was great. I honestly think it was fine. The Spanglish in and of itself. Traditionally, though, at least in my family and most families that I know, Abuela doesn't speak any English. So having that little kind of contextual cue where Thassodar is speaking to her in Spanish, it helped.
Good.
So it was very well thought out. I think so.
Okay.
Like I said, the only gripe I had with any of it was the dad. Right.
In that scene, I think I am most proud of the moment where he speaks Spanish and Valentina looks at him and is like, "You speak Spanish?" He's like, "What, you thought English was my first language?" Like, he's an alien. So,
Yeah. I was expecting more in the later chapters. I wanted him to, like, kind of the wrap up session. I was like, oh, they're gonna go back to Valentina's house and kind of have this conversation with Abuela again and do all these things. And I was expecting that to come, and it never did. And I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't disappointed, but I'm just saying, like, that was the lead up. It was like, oh, okay, this is gonna happen, right? And then I was like, oh.
I would expect that to kind of be the opening of the sequel.
Okay.
Because the sequel is going to be very focused on Valentina.
You're going to have a lot to build up to between her joining the Rangers and the end of the book, basically.
Well, that actually is what the intended sequel is of, because they set it up where Thassodar is going to put in a good word for her, and Vissu is going to sponsor her as a non-member species, and so the second book is her going to Ranger School. So you actually get to see Ranger School and being the first and only human in it. And so then,
is this gonna be like Starship Troopers?
No. It's
which I think I have the book somewhere back.
Well, I mean, I haven't written it yet, so it could be. But no, I want to continue a little bit, because first we saw Earth through Thassodar's eyes.
Yeah.
And you had Valentina going, dude, what are you, why are you seeing it this way?
Mhm.
Why are you interpreting it this way? And now we get to have Valentina go, and she's going to be making assumptions based on her
Right.
background and then getting called on it and,
Right.
and being like, oh.
And you touched a little bit on that when they were feeding Groot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you had a little bit of a, through her eyes POV, like, what is that? That's gross.
Right.
So yeah, I get that. I think that could work for sure.
Here's the hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, people say authors, write what they know, right? And,
absolutely. I know nothing but aliens.
Right. So, I mean, what were those influences that you had that helped you write Thassodar? Books, film, television, real life experiences.
Oh yeah, first one. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, like science fiction and fantasy is kind of my main go-to for reading genre. That's my pleasure house. I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Star Wars, but never really clicked with me. And I realize that's almost sacrilegious to say in some worlds.
I
but
don't.
It's
I mean, you don't like
darker,
Shakespeare, so that's fine.
Yeah, well, I like Shakespeare, but
then how do you not like Star Wars?
It's a darker universe, and so it doesn't appeal to me as much.
Fair enough.
That's all.
Fair enough.
But I love the contrary to Star Trek, Star Wars has such a variety of aliens in it.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see the cultures and stuff behind most of those. You go into the bar and there's 20 different species easily of wildly unique aliens. And you don't even meet most of them. You just happen to see them playing on the stage, whatever.
Right.
And I always thought that was really interesting. And I think that the idea of being alone, especially in a crowd, is something that a lot of people would identify with. I think everyone's felt that at some point or another, even if it's just an unfamiliar place or a low time in your life. If you're feeling kind of depressed, doesn't matter what crowd you're in, you don't feel like anybody is where you are.
Right.
And so I pulled on some of those things.
Good. That's awesome. So we already talked about this.
Okay.
You say you have a book too.
Yeah.
Potentially.
It's mapped.
Is there any more expansion to this universe that you're planning or thinking about mapping out and putting together?
I have notes of possibilities.
Okay.
So obviously Thassodar himself has to go somewhere before any of the rest of it bothers to happen. And if he does, then I've got the sequel with Valentina mapped out. And I've got some kind of spin-offs. Like one I want to do is I want to go back and do Hermes' family.
The Greek gods.
The Greek gods. Right. Because in case you missed that preview, the entire Greek pantheon was actually the royal family of another planet that crashed. And so I kind of want to go back and tell that story with this twist. And I don't know if you noticed it or how obvious it was in there, but that was also the rise of the Rangers themselves. Like that incident of the royal family landing on an undeveloped world and abusing the people was what caused the Galactic Council to create the Rangers in the first place. And so the Hermes and the Rangers actually have a close history in that way. So that's one of them.
So humanity from the get-go was an underdeveloped alien species.
Right.
And, we're just catching up, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Ideally, I'd love to kind of take that series, Thassodar, that world, the galaxy, and kind of do a series of books that go from where Thassodar is all the way up to humanity actually joining the Galactic Council.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now,
exactly.
right? With Valentina, right?
Right.
And your psychotic, small character, Dr.
Schold.
I would like to see how the psychosis even came from. I mean, he's written multiple books.
Right.
Right. We know that for fact.
Yes.
He's experimented. He wiped out an entire alien species.
Absolutely. I wrote a book about it.
I'd love to see how he went from, who knows what to killing his assistant in a very violent manner.
Oh yeah. But it was all for science.
So I'd read that.
All right, I'll add it to the list.
Yeah. So your use of the omniscient narration and species logs kind of has this, when I say intergalactic report, he's kind of writing all these things out. Was that always in your head to do it that way? Did it evolve that way? How did that come? And I'm going to make one note. Toward the end of the book, the log file name stays the same throughout every log.
Which on both versions you had?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's one. That's why it's not published yet.
Yeah.
So,
but it was all happening at the same time, so I just kind of let it go because I'm like, what if this is all within one day? I don't know.
No, that wasn't the intention at all.
Yeah.
No, in fact, there's the one log that is blank because it's when he's imprisoned on Lomax's ship.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite series of books is by Robert Asprin, God rest his soul. And it was Fool's Company.
I just started reading those.
Did you really?
I did.
Are you already through the first book?
I'm done with the first book. I'm on the second book now.
Okay, the first two are fantastic.
Okay.
The third and fourth, he adds a co-author. And I'm sorry to say, it starts to slag a little bit.
There's 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then the co-author became the author because Robert Asprin passed away.
Okay.
And he knew that he was going to pass away. So he started handing off his series as Jody Lynn and I took over the Myth series and Peter Heck took over Fool's Company.
Mm.
And so when Peter took over Fool's Company, if Peter's watching and wants to talk about it, I'm happy to throw hands. But he really ruined one of my favorite series. But the first few books are absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So anyways, but the beginning of that, if each chapter, you have the entry from Beaker, the butler.
Right.
And I always just thought that was absolutely brilliant.
Right.
Do
you feel like it works the same in your novel?
I would love to think that it's as good as Fool's Company. I don't think it is. Not that it might not be eventually.
I love the stylistic choice.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. But why not just incorporate it within the novel itself? Because those are observations that you're making in these kind of little mini, journal entries, right? Or log entries that can easily be kind of interwoven within it. Again, it's a stylistic choice. You're the author. I'm just saying. I have no dog in this fight at all because I am not a science fiction nut, even though I started reading Fool's Army because you suggested it. And I have enjoyed it.
So far. I want to talk about that afterwards because that is one of my absolute favorite series. It's fantastic.
Okay. So developmentally, I mean, did you go in immediately going like, this is what I want
to do? I don't recall how those developed into part of the story. I know that at some point I had written several of them, and I looked at it, I was like, I want to run this through the whole book, and let it be a platform for observation or commentary or different viewpoint on all kinds of aspects of humanity. And I do think that some of them are like, okay, I got to come up with another one. Apples. We'll talk about apples or whatever, And so I do think that some are a little more forced. And I have some thoughts on how I can go back and revise the entire set.
So I was going to make a suggestion, and you may hate it.
I might.
You're going to hate that I suggest it.
Oh, that's true.
But why not create a accompanying book of just Thassodar's logs?
Of like Thassodar's notes and field study?
And you could start it from when he joins the Galactic Alliance, kind of going through boot camp and all that stuff. Come out with that at the same time that you're coming out with the Valentina, chronological thing. And I would love to kind of see his mindset and developmental journey across understanding alien species.
I don't know if I'm smart enough to write that.
Oh, I think you
Interesting
are.
idea.
It might
though.
take another 15 years, but
It might. It might.
I'm reading books that authors have taken 30 years to write. So
yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't take 30 years to get published.
You never know.
That's right.
You never know. If this series takes off, maybe we can start a little publishing company.
I would love for this series to take off.
I would too. Give writers really an open forum to do
I thought you meant Thassodar, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, Thassodar too. Yeah, no, well, I mean, you obviously have to get published first, right? That's kind of the important thing, right? Of it. So, speaking of getting published,
all right,
and kind of developmental style and everything, you used a lot of like alien linguistics, a lot of like bureaucratic elements, and all these things. How'd you keep it consistent throughout the entire process? Did you create like a field map? Is there kind of like a spider web? I mean, like when I write, it's very storyboard-esque, right? But do you have like a little journal, a galactic Bible, as
absolutely.
some people say?
I absolutely do. I've probably got it in 5 different places and 16 different parts.
Okay.
But the linguistics in particular, I've got a whole map of kind of the structure of how the Galactic Council fits together and operates. But the linguistics, there's actually a site where you can say, all right, I want my language to have these elements. It can use these sounds. And you can get the settings down filtered real nitpicky where you're like, the structure of the sentences and the grammar and so forth. Or you can just say, hey, make me a language, and so there's a site you can go in and you can actually say, give me a language with these elements to it. And it'll give you for free the first like 400 words.
And this was 15 years ago this site existed?
Sometime in the last 10 to 15 years, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, okay.
And I forget the name at the moment, but I'll send it over to you and you can put it in the comments.
Okay.
But it's a language generator. And it's got just an amazing. And if you're willing to pay for it, you can actually get, a full like dictionary.
Can you imagine if Tolkien had this when he was
writing? Right? No, Tolkien had to do it himself.
I know, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
That is beyond me. Although I did go in and tweak and say, okay, I want some of these elements. And so so I've got that kind of tucked away, and that was helpful for some of it. And I'm kind of hopeful, like if this takes off, then I'll probably go back into the language generator, pull up that language that was created, the Galactic Common, and pay to generate the full language.
Yeah.
In order to use in Valentina's book.
So, we talk about the language and the like linguistics and this Galactic Common that you created, right? We hear very, very little of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, Fool's Company is one of those books that I just finished reading. It's one of those loves that you have. Yeah. But even in Fool's Company, you have these species within, Captain Jester's company,
right,
where they speak English, but in their own tonal, their own kind of like I would reference kind of speaking of Yoda, right?
Right.
Why didn't you carry some of those elements over into your characters here? Like I feel like Grote could have been a great candidate for kind of a barbaric understanding of the language, right? Or speaking of the language.
Honestly, a lot of that is because most of the time they're not actually speaking English.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's translated, and for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when that could have been useful. It's just there are so few times that they're speaking to humans, other than occasionally Valentina, that I feel like they shouldn't. It would be weird, like Grote speaking Queen's English all the way through, and then suddenly he's like, "Oh, human, go this way,"
Yeah.
And it would. I feel like that would be jarring for the few times he would actually be speaking English.
Okay.
And there's no reason for them to speak English when they're all hanging out in the warehouse.
Right. Right. Galactic Common is
they would be speaking Galactic Common then.
Right.
So that was kind of the premise that I went with on that. Thassodar, of course, is trained to speak English.
Right.
And to sound natural as natural as possible.
Right.
Visu, however, is a situation where he would have been studying English because he's interested in the planet. And so he is a case where I was trying to bring in some of that, but there's so much he doesn't know yet. And so, like when she starts crying and he says, "Do not tear," little pieces like that.
Yeah.
So he's more the case there, but he's more cultured and stuff.
Right. I wonder if he just said, "Why are you leaking?" It would have been kind of funnier in that aspect of it.
Maybe.
Yeah. But regardless of that, it's a great story. It's a great, I'm not a science fiction guy at all. I'm starting to get into some sci-fi little by little,
I'm doing my best
because of authors like you, unfortunately. But I honestly, and I've told you this before, I started reading this outside of the channel.
Yes.
By myself.
And got like 3 pages in, I think.
I couldn't get past the prologues.
Right.
Because I was like, it was a completely new genre for me. It was something that I was not used to. And I was kind of like, I don't want to force myself to want to read it.
Yeah.
But by doing this kind of this cold read, I was like, well, shoot, now I'm forcing myself to read it, but I'm doing it because not for my own sake, but for your sake, right? And for everybody else's sake to go, even if I don't like it, that's not the point. I'm going to read it and I'm going to enjoy reading it because the listener is going to want to enjoy reading this as well. And then the iterations that come out, it's just going to be more impactful and there's going to be more people who are, connected to the story and the characters, right? And as I was reading it, getting past the kind of the hurdles where I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of redundancy here or whatever.
Sure.
In the back of my head, I was like, okay, just keep moving. I really started to like the characters, and I was like, okay, like I feel this now. I'm getting now. I like these characters for some reason, right? And it wasn't a bad thing at all. It was just me going like, okay, cool, like. And I tell you this. I tell writers all the time. It's not whether I like it or not. It's not whether the grammar is correct or anything. It's whether the story's good and whether it captivates you, right? And we had this discussion too, where I was like, less than halfway through the book, I'm like, I know exactly how it's going to end, or I know the next turn, right? And the only reason I was like, I want to keep reading was because I wanted to prove myself right, right? And it doesn't matter if it was wrong,
but it was so satisfying when you turn that page, and go, yes,
exactly, right? And I was like, awesome. I am going to give you one critique, though, because we talked about this and you let me down, just like I let you down in my book.
Okay.
The board game that they play.
Yes.
It does not come back. That is the only time we talk about that board game.
That is true.
He mentions it very quickly in a subsequent chapter where he's like, this is not like the game or whatever, but it does not come back to play in the story.
It'll show up in the second series.
You can't use that as a cop-out.
Why not? It works. Until I write it, you can't prove me wrong.
That's true.
But more importantly, and this is a secret that no one really knows.
Well, now everyone's
going to know.
Yeah.
And so I wish I were further along in the development, but that's okay. Kind of waiting on it to get picked up. The game exists. The game was created by my father-in-law and his first wife when they were in college. And I've played it. They've got it. But it was created like handwritten slips of paper and pieces of cardboard they cut out. But it actually operates much like it does pretty much exactly like it does in the book. And so my hope is to create that game in the real world through one of the gaming companies. And when the book is published, release the game as well.
So I don't want to copyright infringe anything else, but it honestly, in the reading of it, and I'm sure it's completely different. It sounds like Galactic Risk, but and the only reason I say that is because I'm not a big fan of Risk. It's too long of a game for me to get into.
Sure.
And I'm hoping I'm completely wrong on that.
I would say that you are.
Okay, good.
It is more like trying to think what to compare it to.
Well, it's not comparable. It's an alien.
Yeah, it's an alien game.
It's an alien
but
game.
It's got a timetable on it, and so the game lasts exactly this long.
Oh, okay.
Because you turn over the time, and as you're discovering the spaceship as you turn it over, and you've got to get back to your starting point in order to get out and escape with as much treasure as you can find.
Okay.
And
so it's kind of like Aliens, and again, I'm just playing semantics here. It's Aliens meets Dungeons and Dragons meets Clue.
Yeah, with a unknown and changing playing board.
Right.
Yeah.
Which seems very complicated.
It's
like 4D chess.
Yeah. Kind of. Yeah, but it's a really great game. It's a lot of fun, and I would love to be able to bring that into reality. For them.
Okay. Hey, you never know. You never know. Hey, we talk about self-publishing all the time, right? Maybe we'll get into the industry of self-publishing board games now. I think they're already doing it.
They are. There's multiple sites. In fact, I've got one picked out. I've kind of started some of the initial research. I just don't want to go too far on it until the book is going to go somewhere.
Right. Right. Or maybe the game.
Well, the game will bring the book out.
Yeah, you never know, right? I mean, that's how. I mean,
here's the book that.
I mean, look at Exploding Kittens, right? One of the most well-loved Kickstarter campaigns on the planet, and they have a million different variations of it now, right? I'm waiting for the movie. It's gonna happen. They made an Angry Birds movie. They're gonna make an Exploding Kittens movie.
You have an extremely valid point there.
I would rather watch an Exploding Kitten movie than an Angry Birds movie, but that's just me. Yeah. Or Unstable Unicorns. That's a good one too. Yeah. So, to wrap things up, I mean, is there anything else you want, readers, listeners, kind of everybody to know about Thassodar, about, his, the book and kind of, the culmination of all this that you've put together over the last 15 years? Because obviously you said you're working on a rewrite, right? And if we get to the point where, you're at a publishing stage, maybe this does blow up because of this, what's next? What's your timetable look like? How's Thassodar going to develop in the next, 6 months to a year?
Gosh. Well, right now, like this month, I am rewriting the project that I've just finished.
Okay.
That's this year. In August, I have an appointment with an editor who will be taking that project. And while she takes that project, I'm going to be digging back into Thassodar. That'll be when I start that rewrite.
So end of August-ish is when you're going to start kind of dabbling back in Thassodar?
Yeah, mid-August perhaps.
Okay. So you'll be done by September 1st?
Unlikely. But hopefully done by the end of the year.
Okay.
And then I kind of have plans to take Thassodar to a professional editor as well. And I will feel as though it is at a place where they could take it and really just crank it up one more notch.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, and so probably in the new year, in 26, I'm going to just start shipping Thassodar out to agent after agent after agent to get rejection after rejection after rejection. And hopefully eventually there'll be somebody that says yes to Thassodar.
Yeah.
So that's the hope and plan.
Awesome. That sounds like a good plan. Well, thanks for talking about Thassodar. I really appreciate it. You want to talk about your writing retreat that you're putting together in April?
That's an exciting thing too. So the writing retreat is, okay, you know what a writing retreat is. A bunch of authors, they go out to a cabin in the middle of the woods. They share the duties of cooking and cleaning.
It's weird.
They do a bunch of writing, and they come away and going, yeah, we did a writing retreat. Or you pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to go write in a castle in Italy,
Which people do.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. And I think that's wonderful. I hope I get to do that someday. What we're doing is April of 26, we are taking a writer's retreat on a cruise ship, which means you don't have to share the cooking. You don't have to share the cleaning. They're going to take care of all that for you. Mm-hmm. Plus, there's even better food than I would ever cook, and drinks, and incredibly gorgeous views.
Yeah, all inclusive.
All included. And we're going to bring editors on board as well. And so as an author going on the retreat, you will send in 10 pages and a synopsis a month beforehand. The editors will get that. They'll go through it. And then when they sit down, they'll sit down with you face to face, go over your 10 pages, your synopsis, give you feedback, give you thoughts and objectives, and just kind of give you a good hearty sample of what editing can be.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have asked me, like, well, can they even do anything with 10 pages? And I've gotten 10 pages from an editor before, and it has been just illuminating for the entire work.
Mhm.
It really can be. So that's part of what we're doing. Plus, then you get to make the connection with the editor.
Right.
Um,
And you can have more sit downs with other writers.
Yep.
Kind of those writing
We're going to
workshops
socialize with
and
other
just have
writers.
that.
We're going to all meet in the English pub at night and take it over. We'll have our own designated writing space on board, where nobody else gets to go. And you can come and write with all of us in the writing space. You can sit on your balcony and write. You can go sit in the ship's library and write. It's an opportunity to get away, but to get a lot done.
And you're locking editors in with a bunch of writers in for 4 days. So
that's right.
I'm sure they're going to have they're going to be hiding most of the time.
No. They are eager to come and play.
Good.
In fact, I've been in talks with 4 editors already that I have kind of lined up, and every one of them is like, I can't wait. I want enough authors to sign up so that I can go, because I'm only bringing on enough editors for the authors. But every editor is going to be specifically assigned to a set number of authors.
Okay.
And so you'll have your own editor that you share with only a few. It's not like everybody.
So are you, and I ask this just for my own knowledge as well as kind of everybody else, are you going to try to tailor the editors for the genre?
It depends on how many people we get.
Yeah.
Because our kind of target number right now is 16 authors per editor.
Okay.
And so if 16 people sign up, then we're bringing one editor, and that's who we've got. They're fantastic, but they're going to be one editor. If we get enough people where we can divide out those groups, then absolutely. One of the things that as people sign up, we'll be asking, what genre are you working in, kind of thing. And so if we have enough people, we'll be able to do some of that. At the very least, if we get enough people, we'll be able to divide between like young adult, middle grade, fantasy or literary fiction, that kind of thing. But we'll just have to see how many people we get.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, hopefully, you get a couple.
So sign up.
Yeah. And where can they find this information?
That you'll find the link, I'm sure, in the comments below, but it's wavewriters.com. That's WRITERS, writers, not writers. And if you just go there and click on retreats, and you'll see all the information about it. It's on Mariner of the Seas, April of 2026, and it's an extremely good price. The retreat itself is only $249 plus the cost of the cruise, and the cruise cost is, for most people, less than $1,000. So that's very reasonable.
That's and plenty of time to get in there and get signed up and get kind of locked in.
Oh, and well, I guess it may not matter. When are you posting this?
Probably tonight or tomorrow.
Well, in that case, you've got about 5 days. Up to July 5th, we're offering a special deal where you get extra bonus credit on board if you sign up and book this week.
Oh, cool.
So
now, do they have to, if they do book, is there a deposit?
There is a deposit. It's like $100, $200, depending on how many people you take and what room and stuff like that. Our travel partner handles that, Season Sun. But yeah, it's only a couple $100 or so to get in, and then you get that bonus credit, and you have until mid-January to do all the rest of the payments.
Okay, and then this is a Mexican cruise?
We'll be leaving out of Galveston.
Okay.
And we'll go to Roatan, Honduras, Costa Maya, and Cozumel in Mexico.
So Honduras.
That's right.
I've never been to Honduras.
I think that's... Check the website to be sure about that. Maybe not hold me to that.
Email the people on the website. They'll get you all the details. And special pricing, all that stuff. Don't talk to the writer.
No, I make stuff up for a living. So don't listen to me.
So so I think everybody's excited to see that. I'm excited to read a little bit more of Thassodar, and hopefully you have some new writing material that we can cold read here as well, and kind of go from there.
Sounds good.
But I appreciate everything you've done for the channel so far, and thank you for coming and sitting down and kind of letting me pick your brain. I hope it wasn't too painful.
Not at all. These chairs are very comfortable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did take your advice. Yeah, so I updated this a little bit.
I think it's wonderful. It's a great space. I love this space.
Yeah,
And the chairs are very comfortable.
It works so much better.
It works great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you
very
sir.
much.
Absolutely.
All right.
See you out at sea.
Thanks, guys.
I'll read that a story to be